Poor little girl helps a millionaire fix his Mustang when he sees the ring on her finger. Hit the comments and tell us your city or country. Let's see how far this story reaches. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the country road as Emily Collins trudged home from school. At 9 years old, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already weathered more storms than most children her age. Her worn backpack hung heavily from her small shoulders, filled with books and, curiously, a small set of tools wrapped in an old cloth, a gift from her Uncle Matthew. Emily hummed softly to herself, kicking at loose pebbles along the roadside when the gleaming black Mustang GT caught her attention. It hadn't been there that morning, its sleek form now looking oddly vulnerable with the hood propped open and a man in an expensive suit pacing beside it, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what meeting I'm missing," the man was saying, his voice sharp with frustration. "I'm stuck on County Road 16 with a car that won't start, and apparently no mechanic can make it out here for hours." Emily slowed her pace, studying the scene with interest. The man looked out of place against the backdrop of rural New York. His tailored suit probably cost more than Uncle Matthew made in a month at the garage. His dark hair was neatly styled, and even from a distance, Emily could see the glint of an expensive watch on his wrist as he gestured in frustration. "Fine, I'll figure it out myself," he said before ending the call and shoving the phone into his pocket. He turned toward the engine, staring at it as if willpower alone might fix whatever was wrong. Something about his helplessness stirred Emily's natural desire to assist. Uncle Matthew always said that knowledge wasn't worth much if you didn't share it when people needed help. "Excuse me, mister," Emily called out, approaching the car with measured steps. "Are you having car trouble?" Jack Reynolds turned, surprise evident on his face as he registered the small figure addressing him. At 35, he'd built an empire in New York's cutthroat real estate market. People cowered before his business acumen, competitors feared his name. But here he was, defeated by an automobile and being approached by a child. "Just a small issue," Jack replied with a tight smile. "Nothing to worry about. Shouldn't you be getting home?" Emily shrugged, moving closer to peek at the engine. "I know a thing or two about cars. My uncle's a mechanic and he teaches me stuff." Jack couldn't help but laugh. "That's very sweet, but this is a high-performance vehicle. It needs a professional." "Maybe," Emily conceded, setting her backpack down. "But professionals are just people who know what to look for." Without waiting for permission, she leaned over the edge of the car, careful not to touch her clean school, close against the dirty engine parts. Jack watched with amusement that quickly turned to astonishment as the little girl's eyes narrowed in concentration, scanning the engine with surprising expertise. "When did it start having problems?" she asked. "All business now. About 20 minutes ago, the engine began to overheat and then it just died." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Did you notice any sweet smell like syrup?" Jack blinked. "Yes, actually." "How did you?" "It's your cooling system," Emily interrupted, pointing to a small puddle beneath the car that Jack hadn't even noticed. "See that leak? Your coolant's draining out. That's why it overheated." Jack stared at her, then at the puddle, then back at the girl. Her confidence was disarming, her knowledge inexplicable. "How old are you?" he asked. 9, Emily replied, already reaching for her backpack. "I might have something that can help temporarily. Uncle Matthew makes me carry an emergency kit." As she rummaged through her bag, Jack took a moment to really look at her. She was small for her age, with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond her years. Her clothes were clean but worn, suggesting limited means. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and there was a smudge of dirt on one cheek that she probably didn't even know was there. "Here," she said triumphantly, pulling out a small roll of what looked like specialized tape and a packet of cooling system sealer. "This can patch it until you get to a real mechanic. It won't hold forever, but it should get you to town." Jack was speechless as Emily proceeded to locate the leak in the radiator hose and apply the temporary fix with practiced hands. She worked quickly and methodically, explaining each step as if she were the adult and he the child in need of education. "There," she said finally, wiping her hands on a small towel from her kit. "Give it about 10 minutes before you start the engine. You'll need to add some water to replace the coolant you lost." Jack found himself following her instructions, filling the radiator with bottled water from his car while Emily supervised with a serious expression that nearly made him smile despite his frustration at the situation. "I'm Jack, by the way," he said, extending his hand somewhat awkwardly. "Jack Reynolds." Emily Collins, she replied, shaking his hand with surprising firmness. Nice to meet you, Mr. Reynolds. As their hands met, something caught Jack's eye. A flash of deep red on Emily's finger. An old ring with a ruby stone, clearly too large for her. Small hand, but secured with what looked like thread wrapped around the band to keep it in place. For a moment, Jack felt the world tilt slightly. That ring, something about it seemed hauntingly familiar, stirring memories he couldn't quite grasp. That's an interesting ring, he said. His voice suddenly. Emily glanced down, her expression softening. It was my mom's. She said it was a symbol of an important promise. A shadow crossed her face. She died last year. I'm sorry, Jack said, automatically, but his mind was racing. Why did that ring seem to pull at him like an undertow? Why did looking at it make his chest tighten with a strange mix of loss and recognition? The engine started smoothly when they tried it, breaking the moment. Emily beamed with satisfaction while Jack remained distracted, unable to shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. Something beyond a simple roadside encounter. Let me give you a ride home, he offered, surprising himself. It's the least I can do. Emily hesitated only briefly before nodding. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. That would be nice. As they pulled away from the shoulder, neither could have possibly known how this chance meeting would unravel secrets buried for 15 years, shaking the foundations of both their lives, and exposing truths that powerful people had gone to great lengths to keep hidden. As Jack drove Emily home, he couldn't stop glancing at the ruby ring on her small finger. Each time the afternoon sunlight caught its facets, flashes of memory teased the edges of his mind. That ring, Jack finally said, breaking the silence. It's quite unusual. Where exactly did your mother get it? Emily twisted the ring absently, a habit formed over months of wearing the oversized heirloom. Mom never said exactly, just that a special person gave it to her to keep safe, and that someday I might understand why it was important. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening. May I see it more closely when we stop? Emily nodded, curious about his interest, but not alarmed. There was something in Mr. Reynolds's voice that sounded almost vulnerable, strange for a man who clearly had everything money could buy. When they pulled up to the modest apartment building where Emily lived, she slipped the ring off and handed it to Jack. The thread wrapped around the band to make it fit her small finger unraveled slightly. Time seemed to freeze as Jack held the ruby ring in his palm. The deep red stone was set in aged gold with distinctive filigree work along the band. Tiny intertwined vines and leaves that he knew would form the initials O when examined closely. Olivia Reynolds, he whispered, his voice barely audible. What? Emily asked. Jack stared at the ring in disbelief. 15 years ago, I gave this exact ring to a little girl at Sunshine Children's Home. A girl named Lily. His eyes met Emily's, searching. I promised I'd come back for her. Emily's eyes widened. Sunshine. That's the name Mom sometimes mentioned. In her sleep, she'd have nightmares about it. Jack carefully returned the ring. Your mother, Sarah Collins, did she work there? Perhaps she was a nurse, Emily confirmed. Before she adopted me, I was only 2, so I don't remember anything about it. Jack's mind raced with impossible connections. The timing, the ring, the coincidence of their meeting. It was too much. Emily, I think. Jack paused, unsure how to proceed. This child's life was already complicated enough without his wild theories. I think there might be more to your mother's story than you know, and maybe to mine as well. Before Emily could respond, the apartment door burst open and a man in his early 40s rushed out, relief washing over his worried face. Emily, where have you been? You're an hour late and I was about to call. He stopped, eyes narrowing at the sight of Jack's expensive car in suit. Uncle Matthew, this is Mr. Reynolds, Emily explained quickly. His car broke down, and I helped fix it. He gave me a ride home. Matthew Collins sized up Jack with the cautious assessment of someone who'd learned the hard way not to trust appearances. That was kind of you, he said finally, his tone guarded. Emily's got quite the knack for engines, Jack nodded, extending his hand. She's remarkable. Saved me today. As they shook hands, he added, I'd actually like to speak with you both sometime about Emily's mother and where she worked before. Matthew's expression hardened slightly. Why would that interest someone like you, Mr. Reynolds? Jack reached into his jacket, producing a business card. It's a long story, but I think it might be important for all of us. As Emily and Matthew watched Jack drive away, the ruby ring felt suddenly heavier on Emily's finger. She didn't understand why, but somehow she knew that her life had just changed forever. Jack's hands trembled slightly, as he inserted his key card into the private elevator of his Manhattan skyscraper. The encounter with Emily had unearthed memories he'd spent years burying beneath acquisitions and profit margins. As the elevator ascended to the 52nd floor, Jack closed his eyes, allowing the past to wash over him. He was 7 again, standing in the sterile hallway of the Reynolds mansion. Overhearing his adoptive father, Richard, telling his mother, Olivia, the boy needs discipline, not coddling. He'll thank us when he's running the company someday. The elevator doors opened to his penthouse, all sleek lines and calculated luxury. Jack walked to the bar and poured himself a drink, not noticing Victoria until she cleared her throat. "There you are," his fiancée said, elegant in her designer dress. "The Andersons called twice about the merger proposal, and the wedding planner needs final approval on the floral arrangements." Jack barely heard her, his mind fixed on the ruby ring. "Victoria, do you remember me ever mentioning Sunshine Children's Home?" Her perfectly arched eyebrow raised slightly. "That charity case your mother was involved with years ago. Why on earth would that matter now?" Jack didn't answer, instead walking to his study where he kept a small wooden box hidden behind business awards. Inside was the only photograph he had of Lily, a faded Polaroid of a little girl with bright eyes holding his hand in the orphanage courtyard. He was a teenager then, sneaking visits against his father's wishes. "I promised I'd come back," Ina whispered to the photo. Across town, Emily sat at their small kitchen table while Uncle Matthew prepared a simple dinner. "Why was that rich man so interested in Mom's old workplace?" Matthew asked, trying to sound casual. Emily twisted the ruby ring. "He recognized the ring. Said he gave the same one to a girl named Lily at Sunshine." Matthew's hand stilled. "Your mother never talked much about that place. Just said it closed suddenly and that's when she adopted you." Emily reached for her backpack, pulling out a worn journal. "After Mom died, I found her diary. She mentioned papers in the bank and truths that need to be revealed." She looked up at her uncle. "Do you think this has something to do with Mr. Reynolds?" Matthew's expression darkened. "I don't know, but rich people like that don't usually take interest in people like us without a reason." He seemed sad. Emily said simply. Meanwhile, Jack was accessing the Reynolds Development Group server, searching for any mention of Sunshine Children's Home. What he found made his blood run cold. Property acquisition records showing his father had purchased the orphanage land 15 years ago, just weeks after Jack's final visit to Lily. The official record stated the orphanage closed due to financial difficulties. But an internal memo revealed Richard Reynolds had leveraged political connections to force the closure, citing building code violations that appeared suspiciously timed. Most disturbing was a handwritten note from his father. "All loose ends tied, transfers complete, no documentation remains." Jack leaned back, memories colliding with this new reality. What had his father done? And why did Emily Collins have Lily's ring? As dawn broke over New York, two people in very different circumstances lay awake with the same questions, neither realizing how deeply their lives were already entwined, or how dangerous their search for answers would become. Jack stepped out of the shower, the hot water having done little to clear his troubled mind. The spacious bathroom of his penthouse gleamed with marble and chrome, a testament to the wealth that had always felt more like a cage than a privilege. He wiped steam from the mirror, staring at the reflection of a man he barely recognized anymore. Victoria's voice floated in from the bedroom. "Jack, darling, the Huntingtons just confirmed for dinner tonight. Daddy wants to discuss moving up the merger announcement to coincide with our wedding." Jack closed his eyes, the word wedding hitting him like a physical blow. Their engagement had been announced in the Wall Street Journal, described as a union of real estate royalty. Never mind that neither of them had chosen it. The Reynolds and Huntington families had orchestrated everything down to the 6-carat diamond that felt like a shackle on Victoria's finger. "I need to handle something first," Jack called back, his voice echoing in the cavernous bathroom. "Business, matter, always business," Victoria sighed, a trace of genuine disappointment in her voice that Jack pretended not to hear. He dressed quickly in another impeccable suit and left without breakfast, instructing his driver to take him to the corporate archives. There was a truth buried in those records, and after meeting Emily, he couldn't ignore it any longer. Across town, in a cramped apartment in Queens, Emily awoke to the sounds of Uncle Matthew preparing for work. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Where Jack's penthouse occupied an entire floor with views stretching to the horizon, their two-bedroom apartment barely contained their modest lives. The ceiling had water stains. The appliances were outdated, and the furniture had been loved past its prime. Yet, there was warmth here that Jack's luxurious home lacked. Photos of Emily with Sarah Collins lined the walls. Emily's first day of school, birthdays, Christmases. Moments of ordinary joy captured and preserved. "Morning, kiddo," Matthew said as Emily entered their small kitchen. "Eggs are on the stove. I've got a double shift today, so Mrs. Patel next door will check on you after school." He paused, studying her face. "You thinking about that man from yesterday? The one with the fancy car?" Emily nodded, absent-mindedly, touching the ruby ring. "He knew things, Uncle Matt, about my mom, about where I came from." Matthew's weathered face softened. "Your mom loved you more than anything, Em. Nothing changes that, I know," Emily said. "But don't you think it's weird him recognizing the ring, knowing about Sunshine?" Matthew sighed, checking his watch. "Look, after work, we'll look through your mom's things together. Maybe there's something we missed." He grabbed his worn leather jacket and car keys. "Just be careful around people like Reynolds. Rich folks live in a different world than us." After Matthew left, Emily pulled out Sarah's diary again, rereading entries that had seemed cryptic before, but now held new significance. "I couldn't leave her there. Not after what I overheard. Some promises are worth risking everything. For the papers are secure now. When she's old enough to understand, she'll need them to find her way back." Emily turned to the back of the diary where Sarah had taped a small key. She'd always assumed it was decorative, but now wondered if it might unlock more than memories. Meanwhile, Jack sat in the climate-controlled archive room of Reynolds Development Group, surrounded by boxes of old files. Most executives would have delegated this task, but he trusted no one with what he was searching for. Hours passed before he found it. A folder labeled Sunshine Acquisition. Inside were property documents, zoning applications, and a single photograph that made his heart stop. The orphanage before demolition, a building that had featured in his dreams for 15 years. Beneath these was a sealed envelope marked RR Personal. Breaking his father's seal felt like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. But Jack did it anyway, tipping the contents onto the table: birth certificates, adoption papers, a list of children's names with notes beside them: potential, unsuitable, transferred, special case, and they're circled in red pen: Lily Sullivan, special handling per RR directive. The phone in his pocket vibrated. Victoria again, reminding him about dinner. Jack ignored it, his hands shaking as he continued reading. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture so disturbing he could barely comprehend it. His father, the great Richard Reynolds, had orchestrated more than just real estate deals. He had moved children like chess pieces, including a little girl named Lily, who disappeared from all records the same day Jack had given her the ruby ring. As the realization dawned, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Raw, unfiltered rage. Whatever game his father had been playing, Emily Collins was somehow caught in the middle of it. And so was he. In two vastly different parts of the city, Jack and Emily simultaneously came to the same decision. They needed answers, no matter the hike. The worlds that had separated them for so long were about to collide. The heavy wooden door of First National Bank swung open as Emily and Matthew entered the following afternoon. Matthew had left work early, unable to focus after their conversation that morning. "You sure this is what your mom meant?" Matthew whispered, glancing around the marble-floored lobby with obvious discomfort. Banks had never treated him kindly. Emily nodded, clutching Sarah's diary. "The entry says, Truth locked away at First National, and we have this key. It has to be for a safe deposit box." At the customer service desk, a skeptical manager examined their documentation. Sarah's death certificate, Matthew's guardianship papers, and the key itself. "This is highly irregular," the woman said, peering at them over reading glasses. "But the paperwork appears in order. Follow me, please." They were led to a private room with a wall of metal boxes. When the manager inserted their key alongside her master key, box 1524 slid open.